Well, the issue of party drugs and pill testing has suddenly hit the headlines again because of some very unfortunate circumstances for some very unfortunate party goers. But this is one of those problems that is always boiling away in the background. And it's one of those things that I used to have a hardlined anti-drug, lock 'em all up kind of stance. It's one of those areas where I've changed quite a lot. But I wanted to get some thoughts from someone who's actually been face to face with the realities of the drug problem, such as it is. How bad is it? I don't know. I'm going to hear from Krystle Mitchell, former acting senior sergeant with the Victoria Police. Krystle, thank you so much for joining us here on the Aussie Wire.
Thanks, Topher.
Now, there have been calls in response to a number of hospitalisations, they believe from MDMA, people taking these at parties or taking these at raves, being hospitalised. There have been calls for pill testing to be allowed. You've been quite vocal on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, you seem to believe that that would be a beneficial step.
I do. I have worked a lot of these raves. The last one was a overnight one, I think, at Marvel Stadium, and it was Tiesto, I think. And lots of young kids are there, and a lot of them are happy to talk to you when they know that you're not there to just bust them for drugs. And that was very much the briefing that we received when we worked that rave, that we weren't there to bust people for drugs. We were there for safety. We were there to help people if they had issues on the floor, which some did, but we weren't there to bust them. And these kids do want pill testing because they don't want to be taking substances that are laced with super harmful chemicals. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like the message about abstinence. It doesn't work. We know it doesn't work for children, for young people. And saying no to drugs does not work for young people either. They're young, they want to experiment, and we should be providing them an opportunity to be able to do that safely.
Now, this seems to be an area where there's an opportunity to reach across the political divide. It's not very often that I find myself in furious agreement with the Greens, but credit where it's due. The Greens have been right on this issue since long before I became right on this issue. I was very, very wrong on this issue in my younger years. And they're saying that it's cowardly for the Premier to turn around and say, no, we're just going to continue with the current strategy. How do we reach across the aisle on this? What's the coalition of people and of parties potentially that could get some common sense into this issue?
Well, yes, I agree. It is quite surprising to find yourself in agreement with the Greens for a change, but they are right on this issue. And I think that there are probably many politicians on the Labor side that would be pro this issue as well. They're just too reluctant to say. I'm not sure about the Liberals. It really depends whether or not they're a Liberal progressive or a Liberal conservative. I would say Conservatives say no. In fact, I think former politician Bronwyn Bishop spoke about this issue not long ago, and she, again, just unfortunately gave the message of say no to drugs, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
We do need to bring politicians and all sides of politics together, because what are we talking about? We're talking about the lives of young people in Australia. And if that's not our priority, I don't know what is.
I just finished reading a book titled Defending Conscience, and it discussed in detail the Prohibition era in the US, where there was this moral panic against alcohol. They successfully had it outlawed in their constitution, and it led to all kinds of terrible things. Oftentimes, the cure can be worse than the disease. What we're looking at here is an ABC report from the last couple of days talking about exactly this problem. And I find that interesting. I mean, clearly these events are very popular. People want to be there. They're volunteering to go there. They're spending money to go there. They're choosing to buy these substances and to take them. I've never taken an illegal drug in my life, but it's not really my place, I don't think, to tell them that they can't as long as they're doing so responsibly. How do we avoid a moral panic type response and a prohibition era type response and all the harms that come from that? What's the approach we should be taking?
We should be taking a moderate and sensibly balanced approach to this issue. It isn't a new issue. Kids have been taking experimental party drugs for years. I mean, you only need to look back to the Underbelly series to know how popular party pills were here in Melbourne. And if we approach this like we're approaching a lot of issues around today, which is just with hype and hysteria and panic, then it is only going to end up worse for kids. If you tell children, so, and I say kids because I'm old, and I don't mean kids, I mean young people, obviously. But if you tell these young people that there's going to be a strong police presence and sniffer dogs at these raves, all it does is encourage them to take all of the drugs that they have with them at once because they don't want to get caught. And you are going to see an increase in overdoses. We should be educating our children, first and foremost, obviously, that there is a risk in any drug you take. That's why when you listen to a pharmaceutical ad, it has 10 seconds of all of the different adverse effects that can happen from legal drugs. Illegal drugs are no different. They just have side effects that we don't talk about very publicly because the drugs are illegal themselves.
Yeah.
Children need to be educated on the illegality of the drugs and the harms that they cause, but they also need to be taught about safe drug taking. And that might be a controversial place to sit, but it's a place that I firmly believe is the right direction for our young people.
What's the impact of these sorts of hardline policies on morale for the police officers themselves? Obviously, they don't really get a say in the policies. They just have to make a choice. Am I going to go along with this and enforce this, or am I not? Am I going to take a stand, as you obviously did when it came to the COVID policies? This is a different issue now. What's the effect? They're already struggling to retain numbers. They're already struggling to recruit. Do you think a change of policy in this area, or a less adversarial policy, would have a positive impact on morale and retention?
Absolutely. It would have a positive effect if the situation was that you were briefed that you were there as a safety presence and as a support for the other agencies that attend these events to keep partygoers safe. By having these rules in place, all you're doing is creating more paperwork ultimately for the police officer, because realistically, these young people will be issued with drug cautions. They might be forced to go down a path to do a particular program, or they might be sent to court, tying up police and court resources. And so that's the outcome that you get on one side with police. The outcome on the other side is more dead kids.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, it seems like a terrible lose-lose, as the prohibition always was. We have that as a historical lesson, but as the saying goes, those that do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and those that do learn from history are doomed to stand by helplessly watching everybody else repeat it. And that's the frustration of, I guess, being in your shoes, Krystle Mitchell. Thank you so much for joining us once again on the Aussie Wire.
You're welcome.